It's indeed a great pleasure on behalf of the Peninsula Foundation for me to welcome Ambassador Janakiraman, our India's ambassador to Cuba. It's indeed one of the most defining moments for India has been the long-standing friendship that we've had from the earliest times, from the times of Indira Gandhi and Fidel Castro, establishing very strong relationship with Cuba. And of course, a lot of things have changed and developed now, and therefore it will be very interesting to hear from the ambassador. The Peninsula Foundation is, as I explained to you, Ambassador, it's a young think tank we've established in Chennai. The idea is to bring about, the orientation from the Peninsula-based scholars and particularly the younger generation to understand issues of, governance, international relations, security, and of course, technology areas. So we focus on four important verticals: democracy and governance, science, technology, and security, international relations, and the fourth one called transformational paradigm, which is conceptual innovation and focused on technology as well as ideas. We look forward to engaging with rest of the world as well, and then this is one of the finest opportunities to engage with our embassies in various countries, particularly where people invariably look to US and Western Europe. I think these countries make a lot of difference, and a lot of us would be very keen to hear from you. In the context of Cuba, as I mentioned, well known for one of the finest state-centered healthcare systems. They're also very good in sports, etc. So without taking any more time, let me invite Sunod to actually, who would be moderating the session, to introduce the ambassador and take on the proceedings further. Sunod, all yours.
Yes. Thank you, Marshal. First, I shall brief the pattern of the event. This event we've been holding and hosting almost on a monthly basis since the first lockdown was announced. And every month we have consistently hosted an ambassador from India. And for this month, we have the privilege of hosting Ambassador Janakiraman. The lecture, as usual, shall be for a period of about 30 minutes. After that, we shall have a Q&A session, which would extend to about 15 minutes. Most of the questions have already been drafted as per usual practice and have been shared in advance. Some few more questions have come up, which shall also be raised during the course of the Q&A session based on the availability of time. Now, let me now introduce our guest for the evening, Ambassador Janakiraman. He is a career diplomat who joined the Foreign Service, the Indian Foreign Service, back in 2002. He has served in various capacities in diplomatic missions in Brasilia, Lisbon, Yangon, and Pretoria. He served as Second Secretary Political, Commercial and Administration in Brasilia, as First Secretary Political, Commercial, Consular and Administration in Lisbon, and Counselor, headed the commercial wing in the Embassy of India in Yangon. He has served as Deputy High Commissioner in Pretoria in South Africa with concurrent accreditation to the Kingdom of Lesotho. At the headquarters in MEA, he has served as Deputy Secretary in the LAC division from 2011 and 2012 and as Director for the Eurasian Affairs in 2019. He served as Joint Secretary, where he headed the E-Governance and IT division and the Cyber Diplomacy divisions of the Ministry of External Affairs for a period of about 3 years. And as an Indian expert, he has participated in the 6th United Nations Group of Governmental Experts on Advancing State Behavior, and also the first open-ended working group for the developments in the field of ICT from 2019 to 2021 in the context of international security. He has done academically, he has completed his bachelor's in science, degree in agriculture from Tamil Nadu Agriculture University. He has done his master's in science in agriculture, entomology from again Tamil Nadu Agriculture University. He has done his doctorate from the Indian Agricultural Research Institute in New Delhi back in 2002. He is currently the ambassador, India's ambassador to the Republic of Cuba. and he's taken charge since 24th of July 2021. He speaks fluent English, Tamil, Hindi, and Portuguese. He's a keen golfer. He's married and blessed with 2 daughters. With this brief introduction, now I invite the ambassador to deliver his lecture. The floor is yours, Dr. Janakiraman.
Thank you, Sunod. Thank you, Marshal Matheswaran, for this invitation. And I am very much delighted to participate in this event. And one of the few think tank organizations, coming from southern part of India. I'm very happy to be here and to meet the other colleagues who are going to participate or already joined this lecture. This topic is appraising the contemporary relations. It's something tricky, and especially with Cuba. But I will try to see how we can address this subject. And I also glad to know that the foundation is also other than international relations has a subject of science and technology and democratic relations and transformational policies. That's also interesting to see how much that can be connected with Cuba. But I'm not sure, but at least on the international relations, it is going to be an interesting part. Okay, before we go into the topic, let us figure it out. What is Cuba and where it is and its geopolitical significance? A little bit of history and geography are also relevant, for today's lecture. Not everybody will be familiar with the real facts of Cuba. The total size is about 111,000 square kilometers with around 11 million inhabitants. It is an island nation with a large number of archipelagos in the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. About 90 miles from the southernmost part of the United States of America, which is near the Florida state. About 130 miles from Mexican border towards east. Both the borders can be easily reached by boat. So it assumes its own significance, in the geopolitical arena. The first revolutionary boat, or the yacht, Granma, sailed from Mexico to Cuba in 1956, which in fact, as the beginning of the revolutionary thinking and thoughts in Cuba. And from the 1956 up to 1959, they were fighting for the independence, in a sense, from the dictator in that period. And there is also disputed Guantanamo Bay, a US naval base, is located in the southern part of Cuba. A beautiful coastline, rich fauna and flora, a touristic place with good hospitality and very warm, friendly people. Politically stable and no security threats and never exists so far. A single party system with a Communist Party of Cuba with a socialist, Marxist and Leninist ideology. It has a parliamentary system and members from various provinces. There are about 15 provinces headed by a governor. Major cities are connected by road and by air. They got independence from Spanish and US, followed by dictators in the 50s, late 50s. That is what these revolutionaries, emerged in the late 60s, and 1959, they took over power. Currently, we in a sense, the Cuba faces 2 major challenges. One is coming from US as a US economic blockade. Since 1959, it's about almost 60 years of this blockade. Nothing changed, but the severity of blockade only increased. The other challenge they are facing is low productivity of various aspects, issues of shortage of hard currency and problems of inflation. They all are considered to be interlinked in the economic development and political system. The above mentioned facts influence Cuba's international relations. Of course, that's what I mentioned all these things in a brief manner. Now let us focus on our bilateral relations with Cuba. First, I would say that India-Cuba relations have been traditionally warm and friendly, as also mentioned by Marshal Matheswaran. It began in 1959. Why do I say so that our relations are traditionally warm and friendly? Because the present relations have been defined by the evolution of our relations since the historical visit of Che Guevara. I think many people would have been knowing Che Guevara, and underpinned by common values and friendship between these two countries. I do not recall any dull period between India and Cuba, since 1959. We both have been active in bilateral and multilateral area. The high-level visits and exchanges have shaped our relations, starting from the visit of Che Guevara to India in 1959, which was the high point in our relations as it triggered to open our diplomatic missions in Havana and New Delhi. And we also recognized Cuba in early 1959. Yeah, True Republic, a visit by Fidel Castro twice to India in 1973 and in 1983. And high-level visits from India, like former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi in 1985 and former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in 2006, Cuba. We didn't stop there, and subsequently we had exchange of huge number of visits between these two countries. I do not want to run through all the visits and details, but some of the highlights is that Vice President of India, Honorable Amit Ansari, visited in 2013, and subsequently in 2018 we have the Honorable Retd visited Cuba. There was also a delegation after the demise of Fidel Castro in 2016, I think, led by a senior parliamentarian and the minister Rajnath Singh. And as I said, I do not want to run all the visits. There were a number of visits, and then we're looking forward to many visits in the coming years, and plans for various visits. And during the visit of Commerce Minister Suresh Prabhu in 2017, and he's also participated in one of the famous Havana International Fair, and he also inaugurated. And that also triggered some of the business interest between India and Cuba. The other point I would like to insist in the contemporary sense is that after we launched the International Solar Alliance, the initiative by Prime Minister in 2018, Cuba joined immediately, and then Cuba became the vice president of the region, representing the Latin American countries. That's also an interesting point for us in the renewable energy and as well as in this alliance part. And we have also very good cooperation with traditional medicines and Ayurveda, Ayush, and we have signed a memorandum of understanding between these two countries to promote the traditional medicines in Cuba. And subsequently in 2019, we installed or established a Panchakarma Center in one of the International Health Center in Havana. That gives various Panchakarma, Panchakarma, that kind of treatment being given for a week, 10 days. And medicines of Ayurveda is also supplied from India for this center. The another interesting area I would like to highlight here in the contemporary aspect is the biotechnology cooperation, pharmaceutical cooperation. And we have also signed a memorandum of understanding on the cooperation in biotechnology and sensor technology in 2018 during the visit of the Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable President in 2018. Subsequently, there was a delegation from the Science and Technology Division. We had interaction with the various high-level research centers in Cuba, and we are still collaborating with various new molecules and new developments. For example, antibody research and vaccine research. The present day relations is based on the previous relations we had, and the multifaceted relations with the country far away from Indian borders is important in a sense, and it's very close to US. Though little relations have grown many dimensions, ranging from trade to tourism to biotechnology to pharma to high tech, Indian companies have shown increasingly interested in investing and doing business with Cuba. The last 3 years saw some investment in hotel sectors. One of the South Indian group also started investing there. MGM hotels. They have a few hotels in Cuba, of course, based out of Portugal and from Singapore. There is a huge potential for cooperation in sports, and there is also a lot of interest coming from India after we are successful in getting some medals in Olympics, and also very much done by the Cuban side. This not a new one, way back in 15, 20 years ago. Several Indian players visited Cuba and had coaching in boxing and other sports. The only coach, foreign coach, I would say Mr. Fernandez, who is also a boxing coach, received the highest award, like Dronacharya Award for his services in sports, awarded to him by India. Trade is modest, but there is a huge potential between India and Cuba. But of course, we used to have a trade of about $300 million in somewhere in 1990s or late 90s. But slowly it went down. But of course, now we are picking up in the last 5 years, which used to be $35 million, coming from 300 to 35, and then now we are growing up. The current status says that about $80 million of trade. There is also an event going to be organized by Cuba in November virtually. I hope Indian companies participate and then find some kind of traction in investments and doing business there. The other important relationship that we have with Cuba is grant in aid and projects and line of credit projects. We have about $248 million worth of projects committed to Cuba for 5 critical projects. 3 are on renewable energy, 2 solar and 1 wind power, 1 cogeneration from sugarcane molasses is being under the DPF stage. We are expecting some of the projects are going to be inaugurated in 2022 if everything goes well, and some can be inaugurated in 2023. We also extend a lot of scholarship to Cuban scholars. There are about 1,200 Cuban persons have been trained under our high-tech program, and we are giving about 70 per year as a trainee slots for Cuban scholars. On the cultural side, as I mentioned, we have cooperation, very good cooperation, Ayurveda and traditional medicines. An interesting point, I just was Googling, and then I knew that the Indian film Ekta Tiger was mostly shot in Cuba and become popular. I didn't know before coming to Cuba, but I just discovered a couple of days ago. I'm going to see the movie again and see what are the facets of Cuba is shown in that movie. And Cuba is far from India geographically, but every Sunday there is Indian movie screened in one of the national television channels. And last week was Ashoka was screened. I watched a little bit and see how quality it is. They give a subtitle to these movies, somehow it's been shown. And there is also interest for joint production of movies. We have to find out and then find the directors and producers, so that both India and Cuba can jointly make some movies, taking some cues from earlier cooperation. There is also discussion about signing some kind of agreement on the audiovisual cooperation with Cuba. I mentioned about the biotechnology, and then Biotechnology Industry Research Assistance Council visited Cuba and thoroughly discussed with largest pharma companies, BioCuba Pharma, and other pharmaceutical companies. Interesting point I would like to mention here under this pharma and biotechnology is that other than USA in the Americas region, Latin America, Cuba is the one which discovered vaccine for COVID. They discovered, in fact, 5 candidates, and then all 5 have been approved by the local drug registration authorities. The first vaccine administered for 2 years plus children was done by the Cuban vaccine, Soberana 2, it is called. The other vaccine, popularly known as Abdullah, which is being used by Cuba, of course, they have already vaccinated 80%, and they are exporting to now Vietnam, and then transferring technology to Vietnam, and then Peninsula and other countries, Iran, some part in Italy. The Cuban pharmaceutical and biotechnology is very strong and then very thorough in the research. They have new molecules for cancer and then new molecules for terminal ill diseases. They have recently going to register one medicine for Alzheimer, which they would get soon the registration, and then it will go for a commercial production. That medicine is not new, but they discovered that it's also useful for treating Alzheimer. I'm insisting this point because as Marshal mentioned about a strong point in healthcare system. So a lot of opportunities for India and Cuba to jointly do research on these medical field or biotechnology with Cuba, and we're also working on to improve this situation. One company in India, I would call it Biocon. They have established some collaboration in Bangalore, and then they produce some vaccines that date in 2000s or 2010 or something. The Cuban drug Itolizumab is also being produced and manufactured in India. Is used for treating COVID. There is another company, Labiform, from Cuba, is also having some relations with India for producing various medicines and drugs. I mentioned about bilateral trade. There is a lot of potential. Everything they import from outside because of the currency issues and then productive issues in Cuba. And the agriculture productivity over the period has gone down tremendously, and now they are reviving with various, with the support of various countries, Vietnam, China, and India, and helping to improve the productivity of their agricultural policies. On the agriculture, we have also gifted about 60 tractors to Cuba for improving, their conditions. Interesting point I would know on what we can learn, or it is popular, from Cuba, is that the urban agriculture. You will find in Havana, every municipality will have a small farm, agriculture farm, which produces vegetables and daily need vegetables and green leaves, which is supplied to the nearest markets. Now it is popular in India also, various roof gardens, etc. I would say would have gone from Cuba. These are some of the facets and aspects that we can learn from Cuba, and then we can make use of these knowledge for our own benefits. I mentioned about sports. There are a lot of things that we can do with sports, and in case of international, multilateral relations. We are very good, understanding with Cuba, and we are on same pages in most of the issues with Cuba, and we are the founding members of NAM, Non-Aligned Movement, and some of the interesting proposals were jointly done with Cuba, and they always support India's issues. They believe that India's issues are worth supporting. Another important point I would like to mention is the UN resolution on urging the end of United States embargo on Cuba. It's been going on for the last 20-25 years. Every time the UN community support to drop this blockade, and India, of course, supported this case, and we are very good friends with Cuba on this front. The International Solar Alliance, I mentioned, is a very good opportunity. Under this International Solar Alliance, we are going to do some projects in Cuba. One with the solar irrigation pumps under this alliance, and there is going to be some projects about 900 megawatts of solar energy under the ambit of International Solar Alliance. There are a lot of things that we can do with Cuba, and we have been doing it, and I hope this would continue in future, and I'm here to strengthen the relationship between these two countries on various aspects. And we are fantastic people and very good friend of India in this region. And they are also very successful in managing the COVID-19 spread and the pandemic, and that is the That is the reason they are going to open the borders in mid-November for international tourists to come with a simple procedure. By the time they would have been vaccinated about 95% of the population. So there is no problem of visitors coming. I think with this, I would like to stop, and if any questions that you might have, I'll be happy to answer if I have not addressed during my lecture. Thank you, Marshal. Thank you, Sunod, for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that sharp and crisp exposition of the contemporary relations between India and Cuba. Not only would it help us, I'm sure it will help even students who are aspiring for civil services, because this is up-to-date information, like current affairs. It's as contemporary as it can be. Thank you for that. So now we'll open the Q&A session. So I shall go by the questions that were drafted earlier and sent to you. So the first question reads, in 2008, 62 million US dollars were written off as a mark of solidarity towards the people of Cuba. Then in 2016, in the aftermath of Hurricane Matthew, India announced a donation of medical supplies worth US $1 million, and then again an emergency financial assistance to Cuba in the aftermath of Hurricane Irma in September 2017. Can we expect consistent support from India during times of crisis going forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Sunod. I think it is an interesting point in our bilateral relations. Our solidarity with Cuba has always been there, and then it would continue in future as well. Regularly, India has been supporting Cuba when they face some difficulties. You have enumerated in 2008. Even before 2008, we had donated few occasions. You mentioned rightly, we have waived off certain amount due to Cuba's difficulties. It's all chronic issues. The other one is on the disaster management. The hurricane is a common feature in Cuba in a seasonal, and sometimes it damages vastly. Sometimes the damages are less, but people are used to it, and then they manage that on their own. They are also successful in managing the natural disasters. I would add to your donation list. In 2020, we have also given about 270 boxes of medicines during the COVID-19 pandemic, weighing about 3 tons of medical equipment, etc. It is there, and then we are also, UN, and we extend our support in each other's issues of mutual interest. So I'm sure there is no doubt about non-continuing the support to Cuba. It's mutual. We are good friends. It is traditional and very warm. I'm sure it will continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. A supplementary question to what you have briefed us. The boxes of medicines that were provided, relief material that was provided in 2020, in the light of the COVID context, was it requested by Cuba, or was it part of a goodwill gesture from India, or was it a combination of both?
See, generally, what happens in the international relations, the one point comes and joins to the other point later or the beginning. But the key point between two friendly countries is that is the ultimate result. Now, in this case, I would say India has been generous in offering donations to countries which are facing difficulties, which are having challenges, and this is also a kind of India's generous donation to Cuba to face their situation during the COVID-19. Most countries helped India during we faced in 2020 and 2021, and we also donated a lot of things to various countries. This is part of our program of supporting countries during the difficult times. Thanks.
Thank you, Ambassador. Moving to the second question. The President of India had visited Cuba in 2018, which was the first ever visit by an Indian head of state to Cuba. Having been one of the very first countries to recognize Cuba after the revolution in the 1950s, what explains the delay in the first presidential visit?
Yeah, thanks, Sunod, again. See, the question is also a little bit biased, I would say. In a sense, we should not be qualifying this as a first ever visit, so that gives a lot of importance. Of course, first ever visit of President of India to Cuba, and it also adds to the weight that 60 years we have a relationship and becomes a first visit. When I see this question, and then when I look back and then see some history about President of India's visits to various countries in the last 75 years. What are the countries President of India visited, and what are the countries he has not visited? This is a kind of a debate. It is always good to have high-level exchange of visits between two countries. I will recall here, as I mentioned earlier, twice Fidel Castro visited, one Che Guevara visited, and then Prime Minister twice visited, and then we have a lot of exchanges between the two countries on vice presidential visits, ministerial visits, business delegations, etc. I would not say it is a delay in the first presidential visit. I see this as in a different angle, that President of India visited Cuba. That's the important relationship between India and Cuba that shows the importance we attach to both countries. And President of India visited US only once in the last 200 years of US's democratic government. So I don't know, I don't have to explain. Visit is a visit, and it is very important that we cherish the visit of President of India to Cuba in 2018. An interesting point is that he visited the southern part of Cuba, in Santiago de Cuba, where he paid tributes to Fidel Castro in 2018. That is the interesting point, and both sides very much appreciate the president's visit. And in 2015, the vice president of Cuba, now the president of Cuba, when he was a vice president, he visited India, and then he was warmly welcomed. He was scheduled to visit in 2022 as a president. Sorry, 2020 as a president, because of the COVID situation, all the visits have been rescheduled and cancelled. So the president of Cuba could not visit India in 2020. Hopefully, soon when the calendar is okay in the next year or later, we're expecting a visit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for that response. The third question. The United States financial and economic blockade has severely affected the economic growth of Cuba. India has argued in favor of Cuba in lifting the sanctions. The total bilateral trade between India and Cuba in 2019-20 is amounting to $51 million only. Is this situation because of the negative investor sentiment prevailing in the country? Is India, the private sector of India, yet to explore the Cuban markets to its full potential? Thank you. Parts of this you've already spoken in your lecture, but any other points? Yes.
Yeah, in a response, I would try to consolidate as a response. See, as I mentioned, it's a challenge and it's a complicated issue. For the last 60 years, US blockade, the economic blockade is on Cuba. And there is an issue about transaction in our currency, especially, not especially, only in dollars. Most of the trade and most of the international transactions are happening in dollars. And most of the banks have dealt with dollars. And there is an embargo on use of dollars by Cubans. So that has put Cuba in a back burner, and so they were not able to lift their trade relations with many countries. Only a few countries very bold and strongly emerged as trade partners with Cuba. But indirectly, there are trade happening with various countries. I would say the top 10 trading partners of Cuba will be interesting to see and know by the audience that the European Union, the Netherlands, Spanish companies, Germany, Canada. Canada is one of the largest trade partners and investors. The largest investor, I would say, Canada. Despite these factors of unfavorable trade conditions, investments, there are investments coming. There are a huge number of foreigners, tourists coming and have a positive sentiments on this. But of course, money is a money, and people take cautious steps to invest and then to do business with countries of a similar nature of Cuba. There are a couple of countries. Nevertheless, our trading did not stop, and then we didn't go to zero. And our trade is about $50 million. And there is a trajectory of increasing the trade. We are at about 80 million, the 2021 figure, I would say. And it is increasing, and there is a positive sentiment coming towards Cuba. And Cuba is also working hard to attract more investment and business. And why these difficulties and why these challenges, that slowly Cuba is addressing. An interesting thing is for Indian investors and Indian exporters is that most of the things Cuba imports from these countries I mentioned. And India should also be thinking, Indian exporters, basically Indian business people, should also be very strong in their approach, at least in terms of exporting various goods that are required by Cuba, which they are importing from various other countries. There's a huge opportunities, huge possibilities, huge potential for Indian exporters to export anything they want. Cuba is willing to import from India. There is no resistance from Cuban importers. And they are also easing their business regulations. New regulations are coming up. They have recently in May this year, they have amended their business decree or the law to have private companies, operating in the businesses. And then small and medium industries are going to be opened up. The self-employed will become more into the business world now. And the potential what I would see between India and Cuba on the trade would be about $500 million. We have to wake up and see how we can do business with Cuba. And there is also investment possibilities. Because of the difficulties and challenges they are facing, we would have large opportunities. And of course, we have to see the sentiments, the international sentiments on doing business with Cuba. Thank you.
Indeed.
Sorry, Sunod, I would also like to add here that Cuba is organizing various investment and business events. One is slated in November. The one is going to be next year. So by participating in that event as a plenary, as I know, exhibitor, online exhibitors, they would understand more about what is Cuba and how we can do business. That would help to improve and tap this potential available with Cuba. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ambassador. Is this the same event you were mentioning a little earlier about a virtual meet between exporters and importers, or this is a different event? You had earlier mentioned about an exporter-importer.
Yeah, I mentioned the same thing. This is the second. Yeah, same thing. This is going to be the second business forum hosted by the Special Economic Zone and the Ministry of Commerce of Cuba, which probably available on their Twitter and then the Facebook. There is a separate web page for registration. The registration is free. They can exhibit the Indian companies can exhibit on virtually because of the COVID being done as virtual. But the last one was physical. About 100 Indian companies have participated, visited Cuba for this for the forum in 2019 before that. Yeah. I can share those web link for Indian customers to see if they can join that virtual meeting.
Indeed.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ambassador. In fact, we have a reasonably good equation with some of the corporate institutions based in Peninsula India. And we would be happy to share that link to that circles. It could encourage more participation into this avenue. And we thank you for that. Ambassador,
Sunod, I would like to add, if you permit.
Please.
In the potential list of items, I should, say what are the potential things that we can export or, put a shop in Cuba is that one is about the pharmaceutical products. They can, export a lot of pharmaceutical products to Cuba because they import about 300 to 400 drugs from outside. So India is, good in pharmaceuticals. So, we have a huge potential about 300, drugs for 11 million people and then about 3 million tourists. The other item is about the Indian tractors, about TAFE, which is based in Chennai. I think maybe if you have a link, maybe you can encourage TAFE, TAFE to see if they can put a small showroom or a stall. People interested, agriculturists or entrepreneurs can sell from Indian. The other one is the two-wheelers. Two-wheeler market, there is no showroom, there is no dealer in Cuba. So if the two-wheeler, want to put one showroom in Havana, I think that is the entire country will do his distribution. Maybe a TVS or Honda can, the Hero can put a showroom that would be hot selling product. They all import they import these items from Panama or Mexico, which is extremely expensive for Cubans. If they set up a shop, it will be cheaper for Cuba, and then we can also do some business here. And exporting rice. Rice can also be exported to Cuba. And then they import about 400,000 metric tons of rice outside. So if the Tamil Nadu Farmers Association or the rice exporters can export at least 100,000 tons of rice to Cuba, it's a big business, the exporters would gain. We have to find a way how they can export. From Chennai port, they can come to Havana, Matheswaran port. It is maybe a direct shipping or maybe through Europe or through other Latin American countries. There are huge potentials. To have a supplementary question on that, we have huge potential, and then we have to find a way how we can do business with Cuba. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that information. I request my colleagues Satish and Ayan to take note of this information. We shall reflect on that after the event is over. The next question is on sports. Cuba has an excellent record in the Olympics, especially in boxing. Cuba has won, one of my colleagues has accumulated this statistic. Cuba has won 73 medals in boxing between 1900 and 2016. With 4 gold medals in the recently concluded Olympics of 2020, the Tokyo one alone. India and Cuba had signed an agreement on sports cooperation back in 2007. While our paddlers have been trained by Cuban specialists in the past, could you help us, enlighten us as to how Indian sports institutions and individuals can make use of any opportunities that may arise through such sporting agreements, the procedures, who to contact, how to go about this? Thank you.
Thanks, this is also interesting area for us. I had also mentioned in my speech. This started in 2007, I would say. We had signed one arrangement in 2007, and then subsequently the Indian Amateur Boxing Federation and Army Sports Institute Pune had engaged in hiring coaches, training athletes, volleyball, wrestling, judo in India, and we were able to secure some medals subsequently after 2007. And the MOU on cooperation sports was signed in 2012. About 32 community coaches in the field of different sports to Cuba, and they got trained here in 2013. So there is a huge possibility for the Indian amateurs and then private athletes or association to come to Cuba and get trained, or maybe the Cuban coaches can travel to India, settle in Chennai or some places. They can train the athletes on various fields. it is possible they can approach us, they can write to me, they can write to my second secretary, who is also dealing with this subject. We will approach the concerned authorities in Cuba to see how we can connect the interest emanating from Indian sports fraternity and the Cuban authorities. There is already a demand in Cuba from various other countries to pick up these athletes for coaching to other countries. I've heard from some sources that there is a lot of demand. Since there is a demand, whether we will be getting the time slot for their time to come to visit or get trained, that to be seen. But I'm very happy to assist and help in interested parties to connect with the Cuban side. If you want, I can share the details. My email ID, my email
Yes.
can be shared. Our details are available on our webpage, Facebook. They can drop in. We will respond to them as soon as possible. We get the results. We get the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for the encouraging response. I'm sure some of our participants will take a benefit out of this encouragement. The next question is on disaster relief. Hurricanes have been disastrous for Cuba in the past. Can we expect Cuba to join the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure Partnership in the future? Are any efforts underway? Thank you.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, Cuba faces natural disasters, mainly hurricanes. About more than 35 hurricanes, since 2010. In the last 10 years, about 35 hurricanes, affected Cuba. They are in need of external assistance and support, of course. And they are also very much conscious about climate change and then climate-related problems. They have a plan for 2030 sustainable development on the climate change. They have taken a lot of measures. And we have also approached Cuba for joining the CDRI, and they are evaluating the things. Like they have joined the International Solar Alliance. I am sure they will also join CDRI in future. The efforts are underway as it is mentioned in the question. We will see how, because of the COVID, a lot of the last 2 years, a lot of visits, a lot of exchanges are not happening. I'm sure in the coming years, we will see good progress on disaster management.
Thank you.
We are also learning the early warning systems from various other countries. And our strength, as a friendly country for Cuba, we definitely would be helping setting up various, organizations or units or meteorological things for early warning. I'm sure a lot of things can be discussed under this ambit. Probably, if a delegation visiting India would help in joining them, the CDRI. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. On that note, a side note, I'm happy to share with you that some of our colleagues, senior colleagues in the Peninsula Foundation, who predominantly retired from the armed forces, they have enormous wealth of experience and knowledge in dealing with disaster response and disaster relief. At any point in future, if you wish to have some help from us, we'll be more than happy to render our help. Thank you, Ambassador. The next
to respond to the question, sorry, I'm cutting you.
No.
For this disaster, assistance and relief. See, it is important that they visit and see the field. For example, if some of the experts, could visit and then engage with the Cuban authorities, visit various, hurricane, attack places, how they are, managing with recovering from this. A field visit, a field exchange would definitely be helpful. I would welcome the proposal, or I would welcome any kind of, approach from your colleagues. I am happy to connect, as I said. Important is that if they can mount a delegation, or if a group can come and then see if we can jointly do something with Cuba. I'm very happy to hear about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Ambassador. The next question, I'm going to skip the next question because you've already addressed the question, that is in terms of the pharmaceutical sector and the pandemic situation. So you've already extensively dealt with that. So I'm going to pass the next question. The seventh question is, India has supported Cuba at the UN Human Rights Council and also consistently voted in favor of Cuban-sponsored resolutions. Could you brief us on India-Cuba relations in multilateral forums beyond Human Rights Council? Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to recall, I mentioned it in my lecture, that we are very good friends and we have common values, and then we share our sentiments in the UN platform and then in other multilateral fora. They very much appreciate India's views because we also developing countries, and then we very much value the democratic process, and they very much appreciate that fact. Indeed, we support Cuba on that embargo thing I mentioned, and then various other aspects. There are various issues in the multilateral area. There's a long list of subjects. We mutually support each other. Sometimes they support, and then they jointly, discuss with us. For example, on the Interpol candidates, on various candidates in the international arena, we support Cuba, and then they also support. Yeah, mutual support, between India and Cuba. I don't know how we can, take it or understand their cooperation in multilateral arena. They also believe in multilateralism, and we also very much strong in multilateralism, and then we are common on that. And we also wanted UN reforms, and Cuba also wanted UN reforms, and they very much want that India to be part of the Security Council. Cuba wishes, and then they extended the support. Given this, I would say we are very good in multilateral, arena, and I don't want to list what are the places, Cuba supported us. Many places, I would say. And we are friends in multilateral, especially in UN, in other forums.
Thank you, Ambassador. So moving on to the two questions, we've received two questions from Umar Sudiki, who is the senior editor at Financial Express, and a couple of questions that I will share. So the first question, I think you've already addressed the question, but I'll again read it out because I believe this would be reported in her article. She's covering this interaction. Any plans to get Abdala and Mambisa vaccines? The latter is for nasal administration for COVID. That's one question. And the second question is, there were talks of gold import from Cuba. Any update on that? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I a little bit addressed on the biotechnology cooperation between India and Cuba, and also pharmaceutical cooperation. Some of the drugs are used as an emergency usage by WHO or the local regulatory authorities. For example, in case of India, we have Covishield and Covaxin, and one is approved by WHO, and the other one is yet to be authorized by WHO. In case of Cuba, also there are 5 candidate vaccines: Abdullah, Sobrina 2, Sobrina Plus, and Mombasa, which is nasal. The nasal one is under testing, and then it is going to be the game changer in the vaccine industry. And definitely, once they are finalized with their phases of trials, etc., there is a chance of joint production depending upon our regulatory authorities. The Mombasa is not yet reached the stage of going for a mass production. It might take because of various regulatory and then regulatory issues. For emergency issues are different, and the common circulation of vaccines is a different thing. So these things to be addressed. I'm confident that cooperation vaccine is very important and critical cooperation between these between the two countries. I had also visited few pharma farms here in the last 3 months. I'm going to visit one tomorrow and see what best we can do for enhancing the cooperation in vaccine manufacturing, research and production, etc. This is for the first question. Second question on the gold. I'm not very much aware of negotiation discussions on the gold export-import. Would be done between the exporters and importers, maybe private importers, which we are not aware. But there are potential for gold import from Cuba, I would say. There may be reserves, but I don't know whether it's being really explored. How much reserves of gold available in Cuba? I don't see any data here. Maybe if any explorer can come and see, okay, this much amount of gold is available, and then in future there is another source for gold. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. With that, we have exhausted all the questions that were drafted and sent in advance. And the time is now, we have 8:25 in India. That's 55 minutes. Now I'll open the floor for any further questions, and I'll hand over the chair to Air Marshal. He may have some questions to ask. Air Marshal, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sunod. I think there's a question in the chat box.
I see.
Madhavanti asked a question. So I'll just read that out. India's views on UN Security Council reform. India and Cuba have had diplomatic relations for 60 years. Cuba shares India's views on UN Security Council reform, environment, disarmament, etc. India has been vocal about its support for ending the embargo, which undermines multilateralism. In recent times, we have witnessed India-US ties growing closer through Indo-Pacific Quad and now the Middle Eastern Quad. Will or can India use its position and goodwill with the US to push for easing restrictions, especially the extraterritorial application of the embargo? And if the embargo continues, will India risk its relationship with the US to effect any retaliatory legislative change like Canada, EU, or Mexico? Ambassador, would you like? I think you're muted.
Sorry, it was unmuted. I just did that. See, part of the question, I have already addressed.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I would also like to address in a different way now. The embargo is there for 60 years, and then India continuously supporting to drop this embargo. And at the same time, I would also like to say that India follows the independent foreign policy, and then we do not interfere in others matters. And I'm not sure whether we would be moving ahead to go and talking to that country and see to convince on the other country. That I don't think
that's right.
We would be indulgent. Ours is an independent policy, as I mentioned, and one country's relations should not be mixed with the other country's relations. We have a very good relationship with all the 192 countries recognized by UN, and then still continue. We have a relationship with Russia. We have a relationship with other countries where the third country has problems. On the UN reforms, as I mentioned, and Cuba is with us, and then we are supporting multilateral reforms and UN reforms, multilateralism. These all add to the support Cuba extending to us. At the same time, despite this embargo, a lot of countries doing business with Cuba and then doing, investing there and then continuing the relationship with that. Because of this, Cuba does not, close their embassies anywhere. And I would say that there are about 140 diplomatic missions in Cuba. That shows Cuba's willingness to engage international audience, and then they are strong in the diplomacy. And they believe that diplomacy works. Thank you.
That's right, absolutely. I think I just have one question, and you are yourself a specialist and a scientist, I would say, on the agricultural domain. You did mention about the great potential on the agriculture as well as on the biotechnology areas. One of our trustees is also a scientist from Johns Hopkins dealing with genome sciences. I think that is, like you actually indicated, there would be a great potential for collaboration apart from just export from India. I think in terms of research and education on the agriculture side as well as on the biotechnology side. So what is the state in terms of organic farming and organic sciences with respect to agriculture in Cuba?
Yeah, of course, it's an interesting area. I'm passionate about agriculture, and I met the Minister of Agriculture last week, and then we discussed host of areas where we can collaborate in the agriculture field. For example, poultry farm. I will also encourage some of the poultry farm owners in Andhra Pradesh and in Tamil Nadu, maybe in Namakkal areas, can come to Cuba and set up a huge poultry farms. They are importing about $250 million worth of poultry meat. If they spend $50 million of investment in setting up the poultry farm, they in fact export poultry meat to other countries. So that is what the potential is with Cuba. Similarly, for organic farming, the most of the farm here is organic farm. They do not have fertilizers or chemicals being used here. The vegetables and the fruit here are so healthy in a sense, all are organic. I mentioned a little bit when I spoke about urban agriculture. They have every municipality, they have a farm which are organic farms. They don't put any fertilizers because they don't have our currency to import fertilizers, and then they just put the seeds and it grows. That is the reason they have the low productivity. So organic farming has huge potential, but at the same time, we have to keep in mind that the point is here to increase the productivity. We cannot feed the entire population without importing by only organic farming. We have to mix some with organic and some with normal agricultural production, so that over the period they can satisfy the food demand and then production. Since you are trustees in the genomics, I'm very happy to connect with him. They can do a lot of research. They in fact do a lot of research on not only in agricultural crops, they are also doing genetic research on pigs, and then genetic research on poultry to improve the productivity. So there is a potential. And then biotechnology corporation, of course. The Finlay Institute of Havana, and then CAGM, the Genetic Molecular Center in Havana, they are doing high tech research, and then on genetic engineering on their own. They don't have any collaboration with the countries. Their scientific outcomes are their own research products. They have developed more than 10-15 new molecules, and they are in the trial phase. Once it is out in the next 5 to 10 years, they are going to change the medical research. For example, they have a very good drug for lung cancer and other cancers. It's not very much marketed outside Cuba. Only few countries accepted Cuban medicines. So there is huge potential for us to collaborate on biotechnology, pharma, genetic engineering mostly.
So that's a great opportunity. One last question, Ambassador, and is that at the peak of the Cold War, the Cuban military had presence and engagement all across the world, particularly in Africa, etc. So now, what is the state of the Cuban military? And what kind of an engagement do we have with them? I don't think we have. Having been from the military, I don't remember having any engagement at all. But what do you see there right now?
Right, I have to read more on this area. But what I could recall is that during 60s and then during 90s, these are the two critical times in Cuba's history where defense is taught. One is in the 50s and 60s, in a sense, during the revolution, 56 to 59, where they topped the dictator Batista. And the other one, when Che Guevara visited immediately after they took power in 1959, visited Europe, Africa, Asia, including India, where subsequently, he promised to offer revolutionary ideas and then support to Angola, and then they got independence after that. Similar thing happened in Latin America. They also offered their warfare techniques and other things to Bolivia and other places for getting rid of various dictatorial regimes. And in 62 is about the missile crisis, you would know. And in the 90s, the collapse of Soviet Union. That time, I think the support given by Russia mostly stopped. And then I don't think they are pursuing most of the defense things with any country. This is my shallow understanding. Perhaps I have to still read my insights on that. India, Cuba defense, not much going on, but there are potential. But I think Cuba might not require defense forces because it's an island nation. They don't see any invasion or they don't see any threat coming from anywhere on the defense side. They have to protect their own people that they can do very well do with the other means. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think that you're quite spot on that. So it's been a great pleasure having you this evening with us, and it's been your elucidations have been excellent and very, very informative and useful for some of our researchers who can take it on further. But the Peninsula Foundation is very thankful to you to be having spared your time and being with us, and we will continue to engage, and we'll we'll talk. We look forward to more engagement in the future. Let me ask Rupal to cover the vote of thanks. Rupal?
Yes, it gives me immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for this extremely insightful discussion. And we thank His Excellency Dr. S. Janakiraman for accepting our invitation despite his very busy schedule and for providing us with valuable insights into the India-Cuba relations. I also thank Marshal Matheswaran, President of the Peninsula Foundation, for chairing this event, and Dr. Sunod Jacob, Senior Fellow at the Peninsula Foundation, for moderating the event. And finally, I thank the audience members for their presence and all their questions. And I'm sure all of us have benefited immensely from this discussion. And we hope to interact with you again in the future. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marshal. And I also thank Sunod for giving this opportunity to interact, especially with you and Sunod, and also to indirectly with the other audience, through my answers. I am delighted, and I would like to express my entire heartfelt thanks to the foundation, and I wish the foundation best to get a similar kind of interactions with various countries, and so that the audience, especially from southern side, from Tamil Nadu, to know what is available outside Tamil Nadu and how they can improve that relationship, especially in the wake of increasing the business and another political connect. I thank the audience, and I thank again once again for your time and wishing to listen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you.